But aren't the Custodes made from the sons of Terra noble houses? End quote. A reasonable question, GW, seeing as that is what you wrote in your own lore. What is the answer to that, I wonder? Some of them are yes. The Emperor is all about symbolism and authority, so those pre-unification patriarchal houses that passed their kingdoms down to firstborn sons had those sons taken away and remade as guardians of the Emperor. That is still true, but that was not the only source of recruitment. Other methods might have been equally overt, others far more secretive. Noble daughters could also have been taken, and at some point you run out of noble houses. Even after you've conquered all of Terra, the inexorable war machine of the Imperium still requires a constant churn of recruits. End quote. Now, skipping past how unfathomably insulting it should be to anyone to say that the God Emperor's most favored sons are merely just recruits to be churned up by the Imperial war machine, as if they were any other grunt. Again, let's ignore that for a second. Some point, you run out of noble houses, is the argument. Okay, now that is indeed a fair one, but this is also a universal one. The reason why the noble houses were selected were not solely because they were noble houses. It is because they represented the purest genetic lineage still available on Earth. The closest link all the way back to the golden age of technology, as hundreds and thousands of years of very selective breeding between these various noble families will have been able to maintain a far purer lineage than that found amongst the common populace of Terra. That is why they recruit from the sons of noble houses. That is why they don't just grab anyone off the street. So no, there aren't going to be other sources of recruitment, male or female. And, okay, let's move on from the logic that you will eventually run out of noble houses as well. Very well. Now, what do you think makes you run out of noble houses? Recruiting the males or recruiting the females? You know, the ones who produce the future heirs of noble houses. And this is where we get to the point that female Custodes will destroy the Custodes. In total, will wipe them out, will irreversibly destroy them. Namely, the simple biological difference between a man and a woman. This is a fact well known to everyone, except for people who are actually literally insane, or completely unaware of basic biology taught during your preschool years. But as we have now also quite self-evidently demonstrated that this basic biological fact is no longer common knowledge, allow me to give you a second-grade sex ed class. You see, the male human can ejaculate many times, and can potentially pump his baby batter into a dozen women every week. Continuously, every week for 40 years. Quite possibly a fair bit more than that, too. Meanwhile, a woman, you see, no matter how many times she is baby battered, can actually only carry one child at a time. You know, we're bearing for exceptional circumstances like twins or triplets. The average is 1. And they can only do this once every 9 months. Another basic biological fact that we have apparently forgotten. Even were we to use noble women as nothing more than pure breeding factories from the age of 12 and up to 35, where the odds of becoming pregnant and having a successful pregnancy starts dropping off fast, you could maybe get a total of 20 to 30 children out of them on average. Meanwhile, a man, given holidays and 2 days off per week, can still put 260 buns in 260 ovens every year, or at least 260 attempts. That is nearly 6,000 buns over the same period of time as the woman's 20 to 30 pregnancies. This all goes to say that you need a lot more women than you do men for the maximum production of children. In fact, by this math, this logic, a woman is 200 times more valuable from a breeding point of view than a man is. And so, the decision to take the women that are 200 times more important than the men out of that breeding pool to give you one Custodes. No, more correctly, to give you a 1 in 1,000 chance of producing one Custodes is utterly, mentally deranged. It is crazy beyond measures. The payoff is nowhere even remotely close to the risk. And even worse than that is the cost. Let us assume that the creation of a Custodes is again about a 1 in 1,000 shot. That means that on average, to create one female Custodes, you need 1,000 women. If those 1,000 women were producing, say, 10 children over the course of their life, that is 10,000 children that haven't been born, that haven't been introduced into the gene pool. No wonder you're running out of noble houses. You're actively murdering them. Given the same conversion standards, that's 10 potential male Custodes candidates right there. Or even if we write out half of them as women, that is 5 Custodes candidates that you have traded in for one diversity hire. Why on God's good green earth would any war machine in dire need of men and material, that is, in Games Workshop's own words, actively running out of sources of replenishment, choose one woman over 5 men? Not to mention the additional increases in other personnel. Those 10,000 children would have been other noble women, producing yet further children. They would be producing soldiers, administrators, officers, and the countless other members of society that the Imperium needs. This is why female Custodes will destroy the Custodian order. It is actively draining the gene pool that it is dependent upon. Again, only the most genetically pure have a chance of becoming a Custodian guardsman, and you are destroying that gene pool by siphoning out of it the single most valuable resource in it: genetically pure women. This is a self-destructive measure, an idiotic measure, whose only sole singular value would be diversity, would be equality, representation, and modern-day values that do not exist in the 41st millennium. To the point where even if there was a way to create female Astartes, the Administratum would surely forbid their creation for the simple reason that, yet again, their creation costs the Imperium a far greater resource, a resource in an order of magnitude greater than the creation of a female Custodes would give the Imperium. And finally then, the last question Games Workshop asks itself: how different are the male and female custodes? All custodians, male or female, embody the pinnacle of the genetic and cellular engineering the Emperor employed when creating his armies. They are all flawless creations pushed beyond the limits of human potential. There is no difference in combat efficiency between a male custodian and a female custodian. And yet again, we return to simple biology. Men and women are not equally strong. In fact, the difference is significant. On average, men have 50% more muscle mass than women. 50%. Now, if we are assuming that the process through which you create a custodes can simply add another 50% muscle mass onto the female form to reach parity with the male form before the enhancement process even begins, why not simply add that additional 50 onto the already superior male chassis instead? And the only reason not to is the same reason why we are arguing for female space marines in the first place. Space magic. It just works that way. Because, etc. As there is simply no reason whatsoever, if your goal is to create the strongest warrior, why you would start with the weakest chassis. But this is a discussion that has been had many, many times before. The simple answer is it was done for political reasons. It will continue to be done for political reasons. And the explanation for it will, just like these Games Workshop questions to Games Workshop, be complete and utter ass pulls that any amount of knowledge about even basic human biology would be able to defeat with 5 minutes of thinking. Because we're not doing this to create a better universe. We are not doing this to create lore consistency, or to build a world that is believable or internally consistent. We are doing this because it is in vogue, because it is popular right now amongst a certain group of politically motivated individuals. And unfortunately, Games Workshop is quite clearly more than happy to sacrifice their universe in order to get in with this group. Or more likely, quite simply, in order to satisfy the Amazon head honchos, who are even right now looking at 40k like the next big thing since Star Wars. And the GW CEOs and leaders are looking at Amazon like exactly what Amazon is. The singular biggest payday any GW CEO has ever seen in their entire life. So yeah, the new law sucks. The justifications are shit. And it's not going to be getting a whole lot better anytime soon. But at least now, you know why it's so shit. Until next time, I have been Arch. Thank you very much for listening, and I do hope to see you all again soon. Have a good day.